love from the game, such as the world and gameplay, but especially the characters. Team Fortress 2 has so many incredibly well-loved characters that are completely dripping with personality. Even the side characters that are either comic or animation exclusive are more than memorable. To go along with it, I also love the outside parts of the series as well, such as the comics. The comics added a whole lot more to the lore, characters, and humor of the game and world as a whole. One thing though that I'm sure everyone's still waiting for is the 7th and final comic in the TF series line. Back in 2013, Valve began to release comics known as Manco No More. These comics are without doubt the most talked about ones in the franchise, seeing as they tell a very large yet concise storyline. These are the ones that you are most likely to come across when you search for a Team Fortress 2 comic dub online. The best ones are recommended by a channel called The Beer. The TF comics are also the center of the recent dubs online that were done by the official actors, along with one update comic. These comics have been a great help in answering many long-awaited questions, including one of the biggest ones being who Scout's father was. But these comics also raise other questions. What is the goal of the Administrator? How will the series end? Will there even be a 7th comic? Or who can read? In the second comic, On Heavy Returns, there was a specific line from Miss Pauling that got me wondering.
How could mercenaries have done any of this? They don't read zone, they don't petition. Nearly half of them can't read.
Nearly half of them can't read. This had me wondering, which mercenaries could not read? Because throughout the entire series, we've seen nearly every single one of them read and or write in some way, shape, or form. But I believe that more or less she was discussing the level of their literacy, how literate they were, and what the capabilities of reading and writing are. So I spent a few hours going through every single Team Fortress comic, official animation, and some in-game material to find out the answer to this question. So everyone, I hope you enjoyed this video. I hope you find it to be a fun watch and are interested in discovering the answer to this question. Which Team Fortress 2 mercenaries can read? As said, this was not as easy as I initially thought it was, and I had to spend about 4 hours just doing research, because the easy answer to this would just be to go by their personalities, or to go by who's read the least in official media. However, that wouldn't work, seeing as there are characters we've seen read very little, and they are still very smart, intelligent characters, like the Spy. On the other side of the spectrum, we've seen characters like the Mayor of Twofort writing and reading the comics on Happy Returns and A Cold Day in Hell, though we already know he isn't the brightest bulb. So the evidence I'm going by is based entirely on what we've seen characters read, how much we've seen them read, what we've seen characters write, how much we've seen them write, general outside sources based on statements or visuals, arguable statements, and just general knowledge. Arguable statements would include statements that are likely to have evidence behind them, though the evidence does have a possibility of being refuted, being either minimal or shaky. General knowledge just means the obvious reasons or obvious inferences that can be made and unlikely to be refuted. To explain clearly before I go into the next segment, I'm going to list off each of the main characters, list off the evidence associated with them, and explain said evidence. Some characters have more evidence than others. I will be excluding side characters though, like Saxon Hale and Erasmus, so I'm only going to be focusing on the main 9 mercenaries. But for those who are wondering about some side characters, I'll briefly answer that at the end of the video. Let's go in class order, starting with German 985, also known as the Scout. The Scout has been seen reading on multiple occasions. The most blatant of these will be included in Expiration Date and then Happy Returns. First, when they all believe that they're going to die within a 3-day time span, spies have them write their final wishes and put them into a bucket.
Oh, dear God.
This is where we see Scout has written his name on multiple of these cards. In this scene, we also recognize that Scout has at least somewhat of a talent for artwork in an animated format. Second, Scout wants to woo Miss Pauling, so he is asking Spy for help with that. In these scenes, Spy teaches Scout certain actions he's supposed to perform. During this, Scout is again seen drawing the same animated style with large bubble letters next to the drawing, this time saying blah blah boom. In this montage, Scout is also seen reading several novels and books, being seen reading 3 separate ones while surrounded by multiple others, obviously implying the amount he's gone through to an exaggerated extent. A small honorable mention could also go to the fact that he presses the button to warn about the missing intelligence. This could have just been a quick reflex on his part, however, if you look at his neck, he does turn to face it for a brief moment. The third and final major example comes from Unhappy Returns. In this prison cell, Scout is seen reading a novelized version of Ghost DA. This would already be great, but this single panel makes my life a hell of a lot easier, due to the fact the novel directly states what reading level is its target audience, saying on the cover that it's meant for young readers. He's well shown to plan out card and promotion for their execution, likely being able to read this too. Those are all the definitive pieces of evidence out of the way. However, as said, there are pieces that are arguable. To keep these short, they all have the same thing in common, the observation that Scout knows what a logo or phrase represents and means. The first comes from A Cold Day in Hell, reading out the logo on the side of the delivery plane for Honey and Hot Dogs, reading out the name Amelia Earhart. The other two are both linked to the same person, Tom Jones. In the comics, Scout has a collection of Tom Jones memorabilia, some with just a logo over it, and in one of the Tough Break updates postcards, he even puts a sign above it, showing that he has at least some recognition with the written form of the name. In The Naked and the Dead, Scout nearly dies and has a tattoo of Tom Jones on his chest with the word sex bomb, with bomb misspelled. From prior evidence, he likely does know what this means. However, there is a history of people getting tattoos that obviously don't mean what they claim. Like people getting a Korean tattoo they think means peace to all men, and in reality means Resident Evil 6 isn't that bad. The only other honorable mention I can give here is an actual in-game example, the Home Runner's Hobby Taunt. This is a short example because it just has Scout do a taunt by sitting down on a beanbag or reading a comic book. That's it, just him reading a comic. In conclusion, Jeremy Albertson, better known as the Scout, is moderately literate for someone roughly at a preteen level. So Scout isn't illiterate per se, but for an adult man who was roughly 27 around the time of Man vs. Machine, and most likely older at the time of the TF series comics, he should have a higher literacy skill than that. This definitely places Scout as the youngest at a sub-moderate literate state, and the person that we can definitively say how literate he is. He can read, but it seems to only to a certain extent. He can write and does it fairly nice calligraphy, just needs to practice on his actual writing skills. With Scout out of the way, let's move on to attempted World War II veteran and communist-bashing patriot, Jane Doe, better known as the Soldier. Soldier is by far the most perceptively stupid character in the series. Not that he's not enjoyable, he very much is, having a great damage output and a great joking style to play as known as the Trolldier. However, intelligence-wise, he rivals most politicians for how mushy their brain can become. Soldier lore-wise, however, has become a very ranged character that was the center of many comic lines, and is a major player in the TF comics, giving us much more to play around with. To be upfront, Soldier is actually more literate than I expected. By that I mean he's actually been seen reading and writing on a minimal level. We've seen him officially reading twice. In Grave Matters, he reads the will of Zephaniah Man, reading a section that directly refers to the requirement of one of their passings. Prior, the Man brothers don't tell him this, so this implies he's reading it directly. The other one is again from A Cold Day in Hell, where the Soldier reads the names of the crates full of honey. Though from the camera angle, it could be argued that the crates are open, and he's just seeing what he sees. There are a few examples of Soldier writing, one coming from Expiration Date, with Soldier having written his name on his final wish card. Another example coming from Meet the Director, where Soldier had written on large pieces of paper, "These are my heads, do not take my heads." In War, on Soldier's door, there are a few pieces of paper with more writing, one saying, "Mr. Jane Doe." At first glance, I would have just assumed that was someone like his landlord or someone writing out on his door. But right underneath it, there's another piece of paper that says, "No solicitors, do not test me." That second one is clearly written from Soldier's perspective. That's really all there is to the definitive examples of him writing. The only arguable piece that I could find of him writing comes from Gargoyles and Gravel, where Soldier plays a D&D style game with a piece of paper and a pencil in front of him. Soldier is a very distinct class, where the arguable examples of him reading heavily outweigh the definitive examples. There are actually a bunch of them. In War, he's seen in his home with several books and magazines, and he wears shirts with printed lettering. One of them saying, "Gravel Pits of America Scenic Bus Tour." In Doommates, he acknowledges that he's been taking Razzles' heart medication, implying that he can read the labels. And in A Cold Day in Hell, he's seen being able to read small lettering, reading out the S in Sears, but doesn't seem to be able to read out the small lettering on his jacket that states "Made in China." In the same comic, Soldier is shown to know a decent amount about American history, implying that he either just remembers what he was told in school, or he did the research on American history himself. The final arguable piece includes one of the only major animations that shows the possibility of Soldier reading. In Meet the Spy, Soldier is the opener of the animation, starting with him reading along with a statement read aloud from the Administrator. That could either be just Soldier listening to what he heard, or he could be reading along with it like an audiobook. Jane Doe, the Soldier, can read, but it seems to be to a limited extent. A very limited extent. Scout does seem to have a higher literacy level than Soldier does, but Soldier has been seen reading and writing more, though the phrases he reads and writes are almost always simple and childlike. Soldier can read, but it's no wonder why he was refused by the military for battle, when the longest thing we've ever seen him write was a 9-word phrase. The Pyro. Pyro is definitely the most interesting case here, because he's never been seen definitively writing, though the engineer implies in the comic true meaning that they have before. The only time she's been seen reading is incredibly debatable. In Ring of Fire, Pyro is seen reading from a newspaper. This could be a definitive answer to this, but there's one thing some people might be forgetting. As most TF2 fans know, Pyro doesn't see the world as everyone else does. He sees it as a magical candy land. This apparently changes how she sees writing as well. When you shift over to Pyro's perspective, the paper is completely blank on both the front and the back. In that same scene, it's debatable if he even really understands language. In the same scene when people speak to him, she hears him in a completely muffled manner. There's only one other time so far when we see what he hears from her perspective. In the comic A Cold Day in Hell, where he hears a cartoony version of a bear tell her in a clear way that fire is bad. He then murders the bear. I say overall, there's really only one other debatable piece of evidence, and that being in the game. When playing Pyro, you can hear a character speak clearly and fine, and even hear Miss Pauling clearly when she gives you contracts. For me, this only confirms that Pyro's mask isn't causing any muffling as I thought it might be. This certainly shows directly that she somewhat tunes out or doesn't understand when others talk directly to him, possibly just selectively tuning in or out words and phrases, being directly able to understand phrases his mind creates, such as the bear speaking to her. I'd assume most likely why Pyro can hear things perfectly fine in game is to not create a disconnect for those playing the game and who want to have a fun time. However, I believe from this very arguable evidence, that could contribute to Pyro's lack of reading skills. It seems that Pyro has more childlike literacy, even more childlike than Scout. In the game, Miss Pauling even talks to Pyro as if he were a child, using simple, convincing phrases towards him.
Hey, buddy, it's Pauling. Hi, Pyro. I've got something I need you to do, okay, buddy? Hey, Pyro, you want to do a real big favor for Miss Pauling?
So far, all the canonical evidence we've been presented, Pyro has the worst literacy of the bunch. Never been seen writing, the only time they've read, the pages are completely blank, and it seems that Pyro can barely, if not rarely, understand people who speak directly to him, as if they were a toddler. Pyro's literacy seems to be that of, if not less, than grade school. Tavish Vega in the group, the Demoman, is probably the closest to an in-between for Pyro and Soldier. Similar to a few characters, Demoman has only had two definitive examples of him reading. One of these comes again from Ring of Fire, where he actually does something that Pyro wasn't able to do, and reads a newspaper at the end of the comic, reading the cover showing Spy and Scout set for execution. The other example comes from the Abominomicon comic, the only one where we see a child version of Mercenary as the main character. In the comic, Demoman is told by Minesweeper not to read it, to which he then tries to open it, peeking in, causing his eye to become possessed and him to gain his eye patch. This shows that he was curious of what was in it, and to read what it held. I don't think someone who couldn't read would try to open a book and then just say, let's see what we got here. Two of the arguable examples come again from Ring of Fire, and are actually in the same scene. Demoman is seen wearing a shirt with printed lettering saying Badland Brawlers, the team previously mentioned in the War comic. Just afterward, Miss Pauling shows up and shows him a piece of paper that states Assemble the Team. Miss Pauling doesn't say the sentence out loud, implying Demoman has read the piece of paper himself while they were discussing. The third example is the same as one of Soldier's examples. In War, Demoman is seen wearing another shirt with printed lettering, again saying Gravel Pits of America Scenic Bus Tour. Unlike Soldier though, on the same page, he wears a foam finger that said the name of a team, Badland Brawlers, as mentioned before. A fourth example is actually where he needed help reading something. Still in War, Demoman is given the Eyelander, being set in a crate that clearly shows his name, though even when looking at the crate directly, he still asks, what's your name, you dirty girl, in his words, to which Miss Pauling says the name of the weapon. Travis Phineas the Groot, the Demoman, can technically read, but clearly can't read longer or complicated words. I attribute this to his alcoholism, possibly deteriorating his vocal and physical ability to read or even function. We've seen how alcohol affects him canonically in Old Wounds, where we see how far his reliance on alcohol truly sets in, to which he literally cannot function without it. He's actually going below Soldier in his literacy, a place no human being should be. And before you say Pyro was already there, we're not sure if that thing even is human. The Heavy. Heavy is pretty similar to Pyro, being that he's a pretty unique case here. We've seen him read short sentences here and there, such as in Happy Returns, where he reads a note that was sent to him by Miss Pauling. However, we've seen many characters do that. On the other hand, we have very arguable evidence, such as inferences on what he would know or what he keeps track of. In the Showdown comic, we can see him acknowledging the names of his weapons. In Meet the Sandwich, we see a list of ingredients and instructions, most likely implying Heavy knows how to follow these. And in Meet the Heavy, he knows the finances of all of his weaponry.
She weighs 150 kilograms and fires $200 custom concoction to 10,000 rounds for me. Costs $450 to fire this weapon.
However, for some diehard fans out there, you will know one piece of media that I am forgetting, and it's because this is very debatable. However, I'm going to include it, due to how it is presented. There was a game known as Poker Night at the Inventory. It's no longer on Steam, but you can still get it on G2A for a very hefty fee. It allowed players of games involved in the crossover, particularly TF2, to unlock exclusive in-game items that also go for a very hefty fee. This game has us talk about a lot of different characters and their backstory. Heavy does make references to things that wouldn't make any sense in the world of Team Fortress 2, such as acknowledging Rocky 4, which came out in 1985. However, he does acknowledge different things that do make sense within the context of his character. Some of the stuff in the fan base hasn't even been considered canon, and the reason I bring it up is because there was one line that truly sticks out to me.
Went to Soviet College of Mines, Arts and Science. I have PhD in Russian literature.
Heavy actually acknowledges that he has a PhD in Russian literature. This already confirms he definitely has a higher sense of literacy than the other characters. From what I've been able to find, to get a PhD in literature in general takes 6 years. When asked about it, he even confirms that he uses it in his line of work, possibly relating to the finance aspect as I mentioned before.
Do you use that in your line of work?
More than you think.
To me, this already proves that Heavy is a very literate character, though the fanbase likes to portray him otherwise. This would automatically put him pretty damn up high when ranked with the others. Along with that, Heavy is also one of the 3 characters that know separate languages. Learning a language takes a really long time. It takes about 480 hours to be fluent in a rough manner. If you were to learn for 5 hours a day, it would take you about 96 days or nearly 14 weeks. English as well is one of the most complicated languages to learn, being very jumbled and confusing for most non-English speakers. Heavy Weapons Guy is a smart man. Yes, a lot of this is directly based on Poker Night, which, though the game isn't canon, that doesn't mean the information can't be. There are a lot of inferences made in this game that I can't see why they wouldn't be canon or at least mentioned. The characters even mention a lot of things that do relate to their universe, characters, or life, so I'm going to count this as proof Heavy can definitely read, as well as the fact that he's fluent in English even though being native to Russia, which is not an English-speaking country. I find it very impressive. The Texas Ranger, also known as the Engineer, is probably the most no-duh case on the list, but because I have to fill out this quota, here are the pieces of evidence that I have, and I will go quickly. In the comic The True Meaning, he is seen reading a book with Pyro, and this is a pretty damn thick book. Secondly, in the comic Loose Cannon, again we see him reading, this time reading the plans of his grandfather. Side fact, these 2 comics are the only 2 times we have seen the Engineer without his goggles. But the second comic is where I kind of base my main information on. The Engineer is a character that can no doubt read. He is a literal engineer who can read these amazing plans. As we've established, not all of them are made by him. In fact, most of them were directly based on the work of his grandfather. He is literate enough to understand the scribbles that when describing them as complicated would be an understatement. As well as another fact most diehard TF2 fans will know, the Engineer has 11 hard science PhDs. A PhD like that can take about 8 years to achieve, and he has 11 of them. The Engineer was without a doubt not part of the half that Miss Pauling had mentioned. The medic is an absolute psychopath. However, he has acknowledged before that he did have a medical license, implying that he did have some sort of medical education. Med school can go up to 8 years, though he himself has confirmed that his license was revoked.
His patient woke up, his skeleton was missing, and the doctor was never heard from again. Anyway, that's how I lost my medical license.
We as well do have official evidence of him reading before, such as him writing a contract with the devil and the naked and the dead, and him having clipboards of all his own information, presumably written by him in A Cold Day in Hell. In Meet the Medic, we established that his work was developed by him, and even in the scrapped version of Meet the Medic, we do see that he did create the Medigun. All of his work actually has lettering and printed phrases on it, implying that he was the one who wrote down these phrases and lettering just the same. And to mention it, just like Heavy, he knows another language, knowing German, being native to Germany. Though I wouldn't at all put it past him on being such an absolute psychopath that he'd be able to conduct all this work without having the smallest amount of literacy to back it up, from what I've seen, it does look as if he can read. And he does have the literacy that could have earned him the now since revoked license.